The following is a free-for-download audiobook available on Google Drive. From Thom Hartmann's Daily Take Substack. The Normalization of Evil. We thought we were free. How ordinary Americans became numb to authoritarianism. Step by chilling step. Published June 4th, 2025. The following is a song inspired by this article.
It didn't fall in a single night. No tyrant stormed the gate. It came by silence and stage light lies, and rage repackaged as fate. Each step so small we barely stirred. Too slow to fear or flee, we clung to forms and hollow words. We thought we were free. One by one the guardrails bent. The crowd just shrugged and stared. The crimes became the government, and no one really cared. He caged the child, he praised the strong. He mocked our liberty, we called it news, then moved along. We thought we were free. Now the echoes sound like history, but this ain't black and white TV. It's flesh and blood and cowardice and what we let become routine. They called us safe, they called us brave, while killing truth in every screen. We thought we were free, but freedom doesn't come passively. Judge was threatened, no one flinched. The mob wore suits and ties. He promised power unchecked and clenched, and still we compromised. The loyalists drew up the plans to purge the civil tree. We watched it happen, hands in hands. We thought we were free. The boots don't march, they creep in shadows. The fear comes wrapped in pride. The loyal cheer, the brave keep quiet, and conscience steps aside. A little worse, a little more, until the soul can't see, until the kids speak hate like folklore and feign they're being free. Now the echoes sound like history, but this ain't some old enemy. It's here, it's now, it's every day. We stopped reacting, lost our way. Democracy don't die in war, it dies in slow and silent sleep. We thought we were free, but freedom dies in apathy. Raise your voice, don't let it be just whispers in a memory. We thought we were free. Let's fight like we still believe.
Quote, I fear our mistakes far more than the strategy of our enemies, end quote. Thucydides, 470 to 400 BC. Pericles' funeral oration. It wasn't all at once, although sometimes the last 3 months seem that way. Authoritarianism never is. It happens drip by drip, crisis by crisis, until people forget what normal even felt like. This is how fascism seduces a nation, not by storming the gates, but by wearing down our ability to be outraged. And Donald Trump, more than any political figure in modern American history, has weaponized this steady march into moral and civic numbness. 10 years ago, if you'd told Americans that a U.S. president would attempt to overturn an election, openly praise dictators, take naked bribes from both foreign potentates and drug dealers, call the press quote, the enemy of the people, end quote, caged children, pardoned traitors and war criminals, and promised to act as a dictator on his first day in office, they'd have laughed. They would have told you, quote, that can't happen here, end quote. But it did. And now the real danger is that we're getting used to it. Let's not forget, when Trump refused to commit to a peaceful transfer of power in 2020, the political class gasped. Now it's barely discussed. When he orchestrated an attempted coup on January 6, 2021, it was the top story in the world. Today, most Republicans call it, quote, a protest, end quote, or a, quote, tour, end quote. Had any previous president invited an immigrant billionaire who promotes fascist memes to rip the guts out of the Social Security Administration and shut down USAID, handing our soft power to the Russians and Chinese, there would have been hell to pay. Now, Musk's extraordinary damage to our government is barely discussed. When Trump began calling undocumented immigrants, quote, animals, end quote, and labeling judges and prosecutors as, quote, scum, end quote, it horrified the media. Now it's part of the daily churn. When a federal judge's son was murdered by a Trump campaign volunteer, it shocked America. Now judges are routinely threatened, and Republicans won't even give the judiciary control over the U.S. Marshal Service to protect them. When Trump praised Putin and Viktor Orban and suggested suspending the Constitution, the headlines flared, but then faded fast. When he arrested a Tufts University student for having written an op-ed in a student paper critical of Netanyahu and threw her into prison for months, the country was appalled. Now he's rolling out loyalty tests for civil servants and investigating the social media posts of American citizens returning to the country, and nobody's even discussing it anymore. When ICE agents showed up in Portland in 2020 in unmarked vans without uniforms and their ID missing, kidnapping people off the streets without warrants, Americans and the media were shocked. Now, seeing jackbooted thugs with masks covering their faces and refusing to identify themselves has become, quote, normal, end quote. This is the playbook. Fascism doesn't arrive with jackboots. It arrives with media voter fatigue. As the political theorist Hannah Arendt warned, the very banality and ordinariness of evil is its greatest weapon. Victor Klemperer, a Jew who converted to Youth Lutheranism and then chronicled the rise of Nazism in Germany, saw how average people learned to live with, to adopt to bear the unbearable. In his 1942 diary, he wrote, quote, today, over breakfast, we talked about the extraordinary capacity of human beings to bear and become accustomed to things, the fanatic hideousness of our existence, and yet still hours of pleasure, and we go on eking out a bare existence and go on hoping, end quote. Sebastian Haffner, another German observer, noted in Defying Hitler that even he, a staunch anti-Nazi, found himself one day saluting, wearing a uniform and marching, and evenly secretly enjoying the feeling of authority associated with it. Quote, to resist seems pointless, end quote, he wrote. Quote, finally, with astonishment, he observed himself raising his arm, fitted with a swastika armband in the Nazi salute, end quote. And Milton Meyer, in, quote, They Thought They Were Free, end quote, described how good, decent Germans came to accept fascism. He was a Chicago reporter who, following World War II, went to Germany to interview average Germans to try to learn how such a terrible thing could have happened and hopefully thus prevent it from ever happening here. Quote, what happened here was a gradual habituation of the people, end quote, Meyer wrote, little by little, to being governed by surprise, to receiving decisions deliberated in secret, to believing that the situation was so complicated and that the government had to act on information which the people could not understand, or so dangerous that even if the people could understand it, could not be released because of national security, end quote. He wrote about living there and the 10 Germans he befriended. I found his description of a college professor to be the most poignant, as Mayer's professional friend noted, and Meyer recorded in his book, quote, "This separation of government from the people, this widening of the gap, took place so gradually and so insensibly that each step disguised, perhaps not even intentionally, as a temporary emergency measure or associated with true patriotic allegiance or with real social purposes, and all the crises and reforms, real reforms too, so occupied the people that they did not see the slow motion underneath of the whole process of government growing remoter and remoter. To live in this process is absolutely not to be able to notice it. Please try to believe me. Unless one has a much greater degree of political awareness, acuity, than most of us ever had occupation to develop. Each step was so small, so inconsequential, so well explained, or on occasion, quote, regretted, end quote, that unless one were detached from the whole process from the beginning, unless one understood what the whole thing was, in principle, what all these, quote, little measures, end quote, that no, quote, patriotic German, end quote, could resent, must someday lead to one more saw it as developing from day to day than the farmer in his field sees the corn growing. One day, it is over his head, end quote. In this conversation, Meyer's friend suggested that he wasn't making an excuse for not resisting the rise of the fascists, but was simply pointing out what happens when you keep your head down and just, quote, do your job, end quote, without engaging in politics. You see, Meyer's friend continued, one doesn't exactly see where or how to move. Believe me, this is true. Each act, each occasion is worse than the last, but only a little worse. You wait for the next and the next. You wait for the one great shocking occasion, thinking that others, when such a shock comes, will join with you and resisting somehow. You don't want to act or even to talk alone, and you don't want to go out of your way to make trouble. Why not? Because, well, you are not in the habit of doing it, and it's just not fear of standing alone that restrains you. It's also genuine uncertainty. Uncertainty is a very important factor, and instead of decreasing as time goes on, it grows. But the one great shocking occasion when tens of or hundreds of thousands will join you never comes. That's the difficulty. If the last or worst act of the whole regime had come immediately after the first and the smallest, thousands, yes, millions would have been sufficiently shocked. If, let us say, the gassing of the Jews in 1943 had come immediately after the German firm stickers on the windows of non-Jewish shops in 1933. But of course, this isn't the way it happens. In between come all of the hundreds of little steps, some of them imperceptibly, each of them preparing you not to be shocked by the next. Step C is not so much worse than step B, and if you did not make a stand at step B, why should you stop? Why should you at step C? So on to step D. And one day, too late, your principles, if you were ever sensible of them, all rush in upon you. The burden of self-deception has grown too heavy, and some minor incident, in case my little boy, hardly more than a baby, saying, quote, Jew swine, end quote, collapses it all at once, and you see that everything has changed, and changed completely under your nose. The world you live in, your nation, your people, is not the world you were, and at all. The forms are all there, all untouched, all reassuring, the houses, the shops, the jobs, the meal times, the visits, the concerts, the cinema, the holidays. But the spirit, which you never noticed because you made the lifelong mistake of identifying it with the forms, is changed. Now you live in a world of hate and fear, and the people who hate and fear do not even know it themselves when everyone is transformed. No one is transformed. You live in a system which rules without responsibility, even to God. End quote. Sound familiar? Stephen Miller's recent musing about suspending habeas corpus to lock up immigrants and even protesters without trial, that would have sparked emergency hearings a decade ago. Now, it's barely a blip. The Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, a blueprint to purge civil servants and replace them with regime loyalists in complete defiance of the Pendleton Civil Service Act and the reasons it came into being, should be setting off alarm bells. Instead, it's getting the same treatment Trump gave COVID and his multiple defenses of the law and the courts. Denial, deflection, delay. And it all comes back to normalization, as Mr. Gutson so brilliantly chronicles in the New York Times, quote, "And so just when we most need to act, while there is indeed room for action and some momentum to the resistance, we tend to be lulled into complacency by the sense of relief of the one hand and boredom on the other. I think of the trajectory of the so-called travel ban during Trump's first term. Its first iteration drew thousands into the streets. The courts blocked it. The second iteration didn't attract nearly as much attention, and most people didn't notice it when the third iteration of the travel ban, which had hardly changed, went into effect. Now, Trump's administration is drafting a new travel ban that targets more than 5 times as many countries," end quote. When we stopped being shocked, we stopped reacting. And when we stop reacting, democracy dies. But there is a path forward. The antidote to normalization is resistance, not just in voting booths, but in the streets, in courtrooms, in classrooms, in boardrooms, in pulpits, and at dinner tables. Thucydides, who had once the clearest eyes in history about the dangers faced by democracies, said, quote, "The bravest are surely those who have the clearest vision of what is before them, glory and danger alike, and yet nonetheless go out to meet it," end quote. We must regain our vision and resensitize ourselves. We must reclaim our capacity to be appalled. That means when Trump calls Democrats, quote, vermin, we don't say, "That's just Trump being Trump." We say, quote, "That's fascist rhetoric," end quote. When he promotes the use of the military against American citizens and sends out immigration officials dressed up like soldiers at war, we don't shrug. We organize. When Project 2025 tries to turn federal agencies into tools of vengeance, we don't wait and see. We fight back. Now. When armed federal agents hide their identification in their faces the way terroristic police do in dictatorships as they kidnap people off our streets, we call them out. History won't forgive us for sleepwalking into tyranny, and our children won't either. This is the time to remember that democracy is not self-sustaining. It requires outrage. It demands vigilance, and sometimes it needs us in the streets with our fists in the air and our boots on the pavement. If we still believe in this republic and its ideals and in the sacred value of a free and fair society, then our answer to Trump's authoritarianism must be more than words. It must be peaceful action. Don't get used to fascism. Get loud. Get active. Get in its way.